Cool.
Brilliant. Thank you. I'll kind of George, is there anything that you need to say, or any sort of general things that you want to kind of mention before I kind of move in?
Yeah. So I was taking a look at the notes from the last meeting. So I don't think I attended the last one. And one of the interesting things from that was talking about the client and people moving around and the like. And we're seeing that quite a lot at the moment, where the people that are our clients, or that your clients, the role changes, or they move on, and that, I think's a big issue, where the corporate knowledge of the organization disappears, and in many cases it actually rests with you guys, and I think that can be a very positive thing, but it can also be a bit of a challenge as well. I mean, James, you've worked on both sides of the frame, haven't you?
Yes. Yeah. Asset owner, never housing. I've worked for housing associations, but from the main contractor perspective. I'm major asset owner as well, but I've spent the bulk of my career now in main contracting. But I know what you mean. People, you develop relationships, agreements, ways of working, and then individuals move on, and you have to almost start again because they tend to hold on to that information a little bit.
And I think part of the challenge now is that the legislation and also a lot of the processes have moved the responsibility and liability onto the client organization. But there's no entity there, or it is an entity, it's a corporate entity, but it's not one that has got any real intelligence perspective, from that point of view. So although the legal situation is that they are responsible, I think it's really incumbent on on this group and also the consultancy group within BIM4Housing. We had a meeting yesterday, because we're trying to regenerate that and also tie it into BIM and asset management, because we've got a lot of consultants joining the BIM and asset management group. And the reason I'm saying this is that in many ways the coherence of the responsibility and the role of the professional team, I think, has become a bit fragmented. And I think, by law now, the principal designer building regs and the principal contractor building regs have got a far more overarching responsibility. But unless they've got the client's engagement in that, I think there's a serious difficulty. I mean, we're working on a project at the moment where the project manager, we came in about a year ago, and we're now auditing I'm talking about as active plan now rather than BIM4Housing, but we're auditing what's being handed over, and also what is going to be created over the next few months. And the EIRs and design responsibility matrix, they were defined probably 5 years ago by the PM and the team as they understood it at the time, with a representative from the client organization that probably didn't have too much clue of what it is that they were signing up to. So it's been suggested to us, well, it was suggested to us, and I was able to persuade them otherwise, that some of the safety critical information would therefore be a variation, and it would be charged for extra. And I pointed out to them it's in building regs, and therefore it's something that they should be providing anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But I then had another conversation, talked to a lot of people. I had another conversation with a main contractor who was very positive, but they were saying, where does it actually say that at handover we've got to provide an asset list at all? An asset list at all? Is there any legal requirement for the main contractor to provide an asset list? And I thought there was. There certainly is, as far as the fire safety stuff's concerned, because that's in Regulation 38. But I've spent an hour or so looking through various different information sources, and it's a bit woolly.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was part of the health and safety file. I thought it was part of the CDM that you had to provide an asset list, because there's always an asset list in the health and safety file. But I'm now questioning whether, it's not explicit. So anyway, sorry, Daz, I hijacked that a little bit, but
No, it's fine. I think just to kind of conclude on your point, I think the health and safety file has a kind of a core set of content, which is sort of defined. I don't recall any of them being necessarily an asset register, to be fair. It's more like residual risk, final record drawings, but not a list as such. How detailed you define a record or as built as going forward need to be, that it tends to be something that's sort of negotiated or discussed with the client side as well. Some clients want more, some clients want less, just through sort of maybe lack of not knowing enough of what they're doing.
and I guess the point I'm making there is that in most cases the client wouldn't know. So therefore they don't know what they don't know. So therefore that's why, to some extent, I think what we're trying to do I'm not trying to hijack this, but in the BIM and asset management group, we're trying to set up the Golden Thread task force to be able to be that intelligent advisor, so that we're effectively producing a best practice set of information requirements that everybody can work to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's needed.
Yeah.
Yeah, back to oh, sorry, Nikki. Nikki, you're on mute.
Sorry. Yes. No, I agree with you. I work for the main contractor as a design manager, and at the moment, we're finalizing the DRM and the responsibilities that the principal designer building regulations has with regard to REBA stage 6 and the golden thread. And it's not clear to me at the moment what their scope of works will be and how that is differentiated between what the principal designer building regs will be doing and the main contractor will be doing at REBA stage 6 in relation to the golden thread. Because obviously normally before the BSA changes, the main contractor, we would be compiling all the O&Ms, all the access and maintenance strategies, everything else. Now, it's not clear to me how that is different to what the principal designer building regs will be doing at REBA stage 6. So I have to sort of try and model through trying to compile and prepare and agree that scope of works for our HRB, for the HRB building we're working on at the moment.
Yes. Yeah, I think it needs, because the challenge is that the regulations will never be explicit, because they're really looking at outcomes. So the the principal idea is that it will be up to the client or the principal designer or the principal contractor to use their judgment to work out what is actually needed, because you're there to ensure that the building is going to be safe, yeah, and operationally effective. So therefore, that's something that is in the eye of the beholder. But that leaves it very, very open for contractors, for example, to, for a cost manager to say, well, why do we need this? And then it gets stripped out.
Yeah.
George, I've just put in the chat that, I mean, is this not really just dependent on whether there's a BIM protocol in place or not? Because that's the only thing that kind of ties it to the contracts, which I always have issues to, because that refers to the BEP and everything else, which is a constant moving feast. In my mind, the BEP's always been intended to be a resource for the project rather than a contractual document.
Yeah, I agree. The BIM protocol, whatever you want to call it, plugs that gap. That there is no one legislation that says you will provide a register, albeit most asset owners would, in their ERs, require an asset register as part of their O&Ms. But I think, to Joe's point, BIM is the protocols are a flaw. They're a minimum, and it plugs that gap. If you have that requirement, you will by default have a need to produce an asset register. Is, in my opinion.
Yeah, the other thing is that as far as the golden thread is concerned, there are two pieces of legislation that specifically relate to the golden thread, and they do imply that you need that information. But again, the point that my contractor friend was saying, it's not explicit. So he's trying to do the best job that he can, but he's got commercial people within the organization saying, well, show me where does it say that we've got to do this? If they don't do it, they're probably legally exposed and potentially criminally exposed. But because it's not been explicitly stated, he's looking for a little bit of guidance. So I was just interested to see if anybody else has got that perspective, and it's good that Nikki's also looking at that. So I really do think this is something that, as a collective, we need to embrace. I mean, Pav, you're an expert in CDM.
You might. The thing is, I haven't ever needed to build asset registers.
Got it. Okay.
So for CDM, what we've got to demonstrate are the health and safety aspects of the project, and that the operation and maintenance aspects of the equipment that you've installed. But heading towards building regulations, what's the core thing that we've got to think about is there's got to be a demonstration of meeting the standards and the compliance of each asset actually meets the part A, part B. That the principal contractor and the principal designer must be able to demonstrate a cohesive design. And if without an asset plan and UAIDs and a coordinated approach, how can you prove it? Is the key issue that I've actually got on projects like Curzon Street. Is you need it as a means to actually show where you've got the differences. The BIM protocol, having BIM as a foundation and everybody coordinating with that, covers a lot of these aspects. Because if you've got it in BIM and you do UAIDs, there should be no problem. The only other point that I made at the start is, I think you do need, when you start a project, a cohesive management arrangements document. I'm not talking about the contract, but these are the sort of things that you need a bit of a checklist of. Do we know how BIM is actually working? Are things coordinated? Are we all on the same page? And that sort of cooperative document with the client, putting them front and center to say, look, you're the accountable controlling mind. What do you want? What's your perception of risk? How do you want information coordinated? And we don't want it last minute that we need to get all the work done for you. Is it all clear in the contract, or are there things that we need to discuss at the start? I think that's well worth doing. I haven't seen a pro forma that takes the client through that journey to make them absolutely front and center accountable.
That's a really good suggestion.
Well, I think all of the points made in the chat and discussion are valid, and I think, Tab, you're right in terms of from a building safety act point of view, how can you demonstrate compliance? Because ultimately that's one thing is gateway 2, for example, in terms of demonstrating that the design is compliant, but then, as I say, the team have got to demonstrate compliance of the built asset, and how to do that, for example. So they've got to be kind of aligned. Otherwise, you're not able to demonstrate that the construction element is matches what you got approval for in gateway 2 in the first place. So I think that's the simplest way to look at it. That kind of helps define what you need to show at the end to get your final certifications. Maybe what I was going to do was do a little bit of a sharing of a project which touches on quite a lot of the things that we just talked about. It's a live project, and it's we were kind of appointed by the main contractor. Again, I'll mention the names, but so just it's kind of a live project, so just be mindful of that, please. So the project with weights, and it's a recladding of a couple of blocks that they've identified. So there's a kind of a developer's pledge or contractor pledge element going on. So what I was going to do was to just share some of the documentation that we are kind of working with at the moment. The Waves kind of got involved from a very early stage, as I said, because they've identified it as a project in their original portfolio. And in terms of the client, that knowledge of the client, it's very basic, because it's essentially, even though there is a series of buildings, some are HRB, some are not. The client is essentially a residents association. They've got sort of an estate agent as a bit of their advisor, but to be frank, they don't have that knowledge or experience, like a lot of clients that we know in terms of the new regulations, nor does the estate agent. So I think that's just a general challenge that we're having, and not just within BMA, but within the industry. A lot of clients not realizing that all projects have the requirement under the Building Safety Act as well, not just residential high-rise buildings. So that's another general thing which I've kind of spoken to people at the Building Safety Regulator and others at events to say there needs to be a bigger sort of marketing or PR or whatever communications to inform that all clients have got a duty, and they've had it for a couple of years now. So the context is, it's a recladding project of a couple of blocks. The client is not that educated in terms of the requirements, but to be fair to Waits in terms of they're trying to fill the gaps, and we're trying to organise meetings with the kind of people who the principally accountable persons to guide and hold their hand and take them forward. Because it comes back to that point about what do we need to submit at the end, or what format can be submitted to them at the end. So really trying to have that very early engagement with them, even though the project's already started, so that we're trying to look at the end goal and work back to where we are now. So let me just share again this sort of just kind of live project at the moment. So can everyone see that? Does that come through? Just give me a thumbs up.
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. So the first thing that we started to do, and again, like I said, this may be specific to Wait, but it may be for other kind of contractors or design firms. Simply, they kind of call this sort of sketchbook. which is where we're trying to look at the existing building, try and understand the existing conditions, and then take it forward from there. So good things, and like I said, I've got to be been impressed with in terms of Wade's attitude, because they've created a specific team within their organization to deal with HRBs, and they're kind of piloting everything from workflows, the common data environment that they're using, and understanding what surveys or consultants inputs they need. So in reality, okay, let's just go back here. Most of the building, there was a fire risk assessment external walls report done by a fire consultant, so recently. And the works that they're proposed is based on their findings, which is quite limited in this building because most of the facades are kind of brick, non-combustible with mineral wool insulation, etc. But there's a couple of areas of timber cladding. So, for example, in this drawing here, see these vertical slats. That's kind of the main area that we're looking to replace. So, from our point of view, this is a great project to be working on because it's quite small in terms of the extent of the works. So for us to kind of define as a collective the process and procedures and documentation, etc., it's kind of much more manageable, let's say, than a brand new HRB submission, which we've not done a brand new building before. So the aim of the sketchbook is just to kind of identify, based on the intrusive surveys that were done for the fire risk assessment report, to kind of develop existing, for example, this image detail on the right is what we believe is currently the existing build-up, and the one below being a potential replacement for that. Now, what's been quite useful about this approach is that we can see where we don't know things, and that's across the board. Again, you see in different areas, different photographs from the surveys. The top image is always existing, and the bottom is sort of proposed. So we've kind of gone around the building, looked at the findings from the fire risk assessment, and then now we're trying to develop an initial set of proposals. But like I said, what's been the most useful of that is identifying additional surveys and consultants and specialists that we need. So from the back of this, even though really we are kind of only replacing a small area, which I guess pre-Building Safety Act, we would have been quite, would have been a much sort of less interrogative process maybe, or less evidence-based project. But on this project, for example, in terms of consultants, we've got a planning consultant who's got to go through planning. We've got a structural engineer, but ourselves as architects and the BSAPD and the CDMPD. Wade's are they're appointing a facade consultant. They're also appointing someone to do thermal sort of imaging, the facade specialist to carry out a thermal imaging of the building, really to understand what the existing performance is. As I said, we don't exactly know how the building is performing at the moment from U value, which will then obviously influence how we deal with the proposed in terms of bringing it up to sort of refurbishment levels. And the building is not mega old; it was sort of just 1998. So, but even though it's not that old, there really is no record drawings. There's no, building control at that time was NHBC, acted as the approved inspector, and they don't seem to have any information. So it's kind of, I think, a fairly classic or typical scenario where the client is not that informed to the rest of the association. The building, even though it's not that old, doesn't have any information, record information. So we're kind of really starting from scratch. Ways have also appointed registered building control approval to advise us and be like a double checker almost. And finally, they commissioned a point cloud survey of the external building, as well as the inside of it, because there are no, as I said, no record drawings or anything at the moment. So I think they've done, they're kind of doing all the right things and appointing all the right people to enable us to understand the existing scenario, the intrusive surveys that are going to be that have kind of evolved from the kind of unknowns that we've identified from simply just generating these existing and proposed details is going to drive a second set of intrusive surveys, including just trying to understand what the existing, or to prove the existing capacity of the structure and the blockwork walls that the current facade is hung off. Because from the feedback from all the other kind of groups and the chats from people who've done the building safety Gateway 2 application, for example, is that we cannot be ambiguous or say that we've assumed this. That doesn't go down, because if we've assumed something, then it means that we don't know. So how can we therefore say what we're proposing is compliant? And that's, I think, a key lesson going forward in any application, but generally across, I guess, in any piece of work that we're doing. We as a design team, as a principal designer, as principal contractor, have to be sure of what the existing build-ups are, what their performance and capacity and capability are, to then be able to say what we're putting back in new is still compliant and isn't going to affect anything to do with the structure or the fire structure, etc. So this is, yeah, so this is the kind of this sketchbook, which has been really useful, just even on this small extent of work, including balcony, timber deck, balconies. And it's generated, like I said, a new set of intrusive surveys to add to the ones that have already been done for us to better understand. And like I said, the 3D point cloud survey and the Revit survey model that came from what they initiated is all, I think, doing exactly what a responsible or knowledgeable client / contractor and the PD team needs to do going forward. Any kind of general questions on what I've shown in the sketchbook? I'll show a couple of other things. We've got a couple of tabs open, show a couple of other things that we're doing. Anyone got any questions on this? Just shout out. Can't see everyone. They put a hand up, but does anyone have any questions just to anything I'm showing now? Or should I just carry on? Take silence, just carry on. Couple of other things that we've done. I think one of the things that was mentioned about was just trying to understand from the beginning. Trying to understand from the beginning what do we need for the gateways. As I mentioned, we're kind of keen to work not focus on this Gateway 2, but actually focus on Gateway 3 and the handover information requirements and work out. I think a lot of focus on the Gateway 2 submission, but actually some of the things in Gateway 3 will influence what we need in Gateway 2 and in Gateway 1. So that's the aim. So what we've done here is to generate a Gateway 2 information and checklist, just to kind of, again, make sure that we don't miss something obvious that we need to submit. So for example, here we've got information about, just scroll down. Basic information that is required in the submission. I'm sorry, there's a bit of a delay on my thinking points scrolling. But some of the basic questions that are asked is, number of stories, what is the height to them, what are the use of the buildings. Some of these are related to when you're doing a new application for a new project, but we feel, well, if it's required for a new build, then we can find it out for, we should obviously find it out for an existing building. So we're kind of using this checklist just to add to it as we go through incrementally. And we are checking this every couple of weeks in our DTMs and BSA and CDM meetings to make sure that we haven't missed anything fundamental. And if we have, then obviously we're picking up at a regular, bi-weekly kind of sessions. Make sure that if an additional survey needs to be done, or if additional information is required from the client, or if we need to advise the client of certain things, that's all been picked up. So this is purely for the Gateway 2 submission. We're looking to create one for the Gateway 3 as well. Like I said, I think it's really important to look right at the end of the project and work back to avoid sort of having to do something last minute or quickly. So hopefully that's picking up on that comment earlier about very early engagement with the client team, the PC and the PD, to make sure we're not missing something. And then a lot of people will have seen this, which is the one, the RIBA sort of building regulations tracker. We're kind of using that across the team to try and obviously capture initial strategy, whether the regulation, that particular regulation is relevant for the project or not. And if it is, trying to kind of go, okay, well, this is the information we have at the moment, keeping in mind we're at sort of pre-application stage. And then going forward, asking the various consultants and going forward, the sort of specialist subcontractors to input into this to show, demonstrate compliance. I think, like I said, a lot of people I think are familiar with this ROBA kind of template tracker. When it comes to the actual submission for regulation for Gateway 2, the aim is to extract from this the actual clear narrative, which kind of demonstrates, yes, this regulation is relevant, and here is the information and the narrative and the supporting evidence, whether it's manufacturer's information, their certificates, our drawings, our specification, or to say why we think that particular regulation is not relevant. So that there's no ambiguity when someone receives this application as to why we haven't done, part M, for example. We're not affecting anything in that sense on this project in terms of the works that we're doing. So we will just write a short paragraph or a sentence to explain why we believe it's not relevant. And that way, the regulator, when they're looking through, there are no gaps. They might go, oh, they've not mentioned Part M. So rather than leaving it blank or not submitting anything, we're going to make sure that we've got a page for every single one of the regs to say whether it's relevant and explain all of the narrative, or if it's not relevant, explain obviously why we think it's not relevant either. And then and then really just finally in terms of the common data environment, this is really from Waits that led this. The client doesn't have any sophisticated or anything like a common data environment set up at the moment. So that's another thing that we're looking to talk to them about, to try and upskill, but also agree how are we going to maintain that golden thread when we hand it over at the end of the project. What format do they need it? What format can they read? What information do they want in their health and safety, et cetera, et cetera. So all of the things that we were talking today earlier on about things that the client doesn't know. So for us, it's quite an interesting project because I think it's very typical. I think there's other people in the call from client side or asset owners who will probably be able to reflect on that closer. But I think there's a lot of clients and projects and buildings which are similarly have got a similar kind of scenario. And so I think what we and Waits are doing is really quite, I think, typical, or I think it's going to be quite typical going forward on a lot of projects, everything from surveys to the consultants and the specialists that we're appointing to try and de-risk the gateway process predominantly, but also to make sure that our design is compliant going forward. So yeah, that's kind of where we are on that particular project. I'll obviously keep you updated as we go through. But if anyone's got any questions or comments, I'll really appreciate it. Or if anyone's doing any similar projects and are doing either something differently or in addition, that would also be, I think, quite good to just sort of share with the team because I think it's, as I say, it's a knowledge sharing. We're kind of all trying to help each other to ultimately reduce this blockage that's happening in the Gateway 2 process. If that's part of that's caused by applications which are not clear or complete, then talking amongst ourselves, make sure that at least as a minimum our applications are fully compliant. That will then obviously help reduce delays in the system. If there's delays caused by obviously kind of very detailed questions, that's one thing. But I think the first thing that we can do as designers is to make sure that applications are not incomplete, because that will help all of us, because then our projects can go through the system and onto site ultimately.
Gaz, a couple of things just before I jump in. You've got a problem with your mic. It's working, but it's coming over. I think when you listen to the recording, you'll hear that it's a bit muffled. So just to let you know, it's gone off
picking
now.
up background as well. Is it picking up a lot of background noise?
It might be a bit better now, actually. I don't know if you've adjusted something.
No, I think it's a case of I think some of the background noise comes through as well. So I'll just speak close, louder.
Yeah, that's
Thank you.
actually better.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I've got a question because I've been looking at that. You showed me the that Reba spreadsheet recently, and I don't know how many other people are using it. Could you put your hand up if you're using that that same Reba PD guide? No. Okay, nobody is. It seemed to me. Hi, Nikki. Are you using it? You're using it, are you? Okay. It seemed to me, who fills it in? Does.
Combination. So what I've asked is the initially I've gone through all the tabs and identified which I believe is relevant to the project. Then I've shared that with all the team, and I'm asking them to then fill out their particular responses, either to kind of say yes, they believe the regulation is relevant or not. And then I would collate all of those, and in collating them, if I have any queries to those individuals or the team members, I will kind of include that in the matrix as well. So, and then we just keep going through that iterative process. So it's a combination of the designers who've been appointed, and going forward, it'll be a combination of contractors and specialist subcontractors. And then I, as the PD, will collate and query and question basically going forward.
Okay, I'm asking the question because certainly in my experience, issuing spreadsheet templates to people and also issuing templates to people to get them to fill in is notoriously difficult to get them to do it. And that the document, it's quite a complex spreadsheet, and I think I don't know if any of the information is cross-referenced between tabs, but it looks to me as though it's a very complex thing to complete. Have you had people doing it, or you've only just started using it, I guess?
Yeah, we've done it on another couple of projects. Some people are more familiar with it. But in terms of one consultant on this scheme, the structural engineer hasn't used it before. Fire have, for example, and on previous schemes, the M&E and the structurals and fire had all used it. So there's different, I guess, levels of experience with using it. And on this, like I said, that's why on this particular project, it's quite nice because actually it's quite contained, the building works that we're doing. And that's making it more hand manageable. I guess Joe and Philip and you guys are doing on brand new buildings. It'll be interesting to hear what templates you're using or how you're going through that, because I've not gone down that route yet.
Well, I've not seen this template before, but I think our teams are busy trying to reinvent the wheel by the sounds of things, and build their own templates, because that's what architects do best, isn't it? But I will share this with them because I wasn't aware that this was available.
Yeah, I think you just get it from the RIBA. I think it was led by Dieter from Eric Perry Architects, who's also written that RIBA guide to the PD, which is a very clear little book. If you've not seen it already, it's a small kind of A5-ish kind of size you can get from various bookshops, but it's an RIBA publication. And in that is again very easy to read, to understand. He's an architectural person, but he's got a legal background as well. So he studied or kind of got degrees from both, I believe. So the book is very clear because it's coming from someone who's got both the architectural and the legal knowledge. And he's on the RIB advisory group and all sorts of other groups around this topic. So that is in response to your point, George. The table is quite large. I agree, the template, but in terms of the regulations, they are what, as I think we all know, they obviously haven't changed from the BSA hasn't changed any of the main regulations. And by when you look at actually the different tabs, when you look at the wider consultant team, predominantly they only have to deal with one or two or three of them.
Yeah.
The architectural team and the PD obviously has to go through all of them because they've got a coordinating lead designer role. But structures predominantly has to look at only, let's say, part A. Fire, part B, M&E might look at some other things. But so when I've gone through it, I actually went through it yesterday with the team. When I went through it, giving them an overview, I think it made them less anxious. And I think that is required, because if you just share that and just say to fill it in, it's going to be daunting. So I think that's part of my role really as the PD, to kind of ease the team into it. So it makes it less, you don't freeze and you don't do anything, which is true. And it's about capturing the thinking process. It's not the final answer. That is what we will submit in some sort of summary file notes to the BSR. So it's an audit trail really to kind of be able to demonstrate that we've gone through that plan, manage, monitor requirements. Sorry, Philip, you got your hand up?
Well, actually, I had that question in the back of my mind. So you're not submitting this template, that's a work in progress for your own, and then you create a report from it. So
that's right. I think other practices have submitted a cleaned up version, let's say, of the tracker as their evidencing, and others have submitted technical file notes almost, something which is more user friendly or reader friendly, let's say, because we've got to keep in mind that whoever is the kind of lead case officer from the BSR is never going to know the project.
Yeah.
And it actually is a criticism that we made to the BSR when I met them is we need to bring in something where surely once the application is being validated, surely a half an hour presentation with the lead PD and the PC and the lead team from their side should help avoid like simple questions kind of coming through and obvious ones. Because on some complicated projects, someone surely explaining it has got to be helpful for the BSR team, and to avoid silly questions coming back, which cynics have said as a way for them to ask for extension of time. Wait for ages, then ask a very sort of simple question to go, well, can we have an extension of time, please? So that's the kind of cynical side of it, but a bit like a pre-app kind of essentially, but post the application being validated, I think it's something that they will look to bring in. Any other sort of questions or experiences one way or the other? Nikki, I know obviously you said you're using the template. How have you found it? She's still here? Oh yeah, sorry, Nikki, you're still.
Yes,
how
I
have
am,
you
sorry.
found it? Sorry.
Actually, I did raise my hand to ask you the question because on this project, it's been very, very difficult to get the consultant. Well, to be honest, every stakeholder is buying, and it's not moving fast at all. So I wanted to pick your brain on how you are managing to get everyone to fill in their own sections actually, because on our project that has not been the case at all.
Yeah, and George and I tried this on another project ages ago to try and ask people, and we end up trying to get them around the table physically to try and get them to fill information which they would already have known or known. So none of this, none of the information required in the tracker is something that they would have to create brand new. And then if you're, and I think that's where I first started to try and ease their kind of concerns, saying, well, to a structural engineer, well, surely you are using a particular regulation or a Eurocode in terms of designing the structure or checking the structure in our case, that it can take this new proposed facade build-up. So if that's the case, then all you need to do is say we're using Eurocode this or British Standard X or whatever. So that's something they must already be doing. And then in terms of a short narrative about how they're kind of determining that the structure is suitable, and then putting a link into a section in their report or a drawing or a specification, none of that is actually new information or work that they need to do. So I think that's the first place to start. And then in terms of trying to get them to fill it in, some, as I said, have been more responsive because they've done it before. So they're kind of more familiar and comfortable with it. Others, like the structural engineer who's not done it, I've had a separate phone call with them. And I suspect I will may need to have another phone call with them individually. And as the PD, I think that's something I must do to try and make sure that the team are kind of trying to manage and coordinate and communicate and all those things that the Act asks us to do. So it may be that group sessions are not working. You may have to rely on just the individual sessions to talk them through that, try and get them input. But ultimately, it's you know, the worst case is you can say, well, it's a legal requirement. So they should really understand that. But you may need to facilitate by having one-to-one sessions beyond the group sessions, let's say, and just general emails, because you may actually have to facilitate a phone call or a physical meeting. I've had to do that a couple of times. So that might be something you need to do as well, just to get things going.
Yeah, just picking up on what Joe's said about why is it still being done in Excel. I've started. We're establishing a collaboration at the moment, Joe, with Malta.
Okay.
And I was talking with Mo earlier in the week, and that might be a route to do this. If it's not too complex. I mean, do Reba charge for it? Is this a commercial?
No, it's just a free template, and I think people are adapting it to their preferences. I've sort of adapted a little bit of it myself. I think the only thing I would say in terms of, Joe, your point, and I think this is the same with BIM as well, the discussions we had, or is as Nikki's sort of experience as well, just even getting them to fill an Excel. The Excel's obviously that kind of easy to share, everyone has Excel, etc. kind of thing. However, one of the things that, for example, on the common data environment that we're using, that Waits have sort of initiated, we could set this up as like a live SharePoint, for example, simplistically. But I actually rejected it because as the PD, I don't actually want everyone to just fill things in and adapt or make changes to this document, because they may delete, let's say, something they've written previously. I actually want the manual process personally as the PD of receiving other people's Excels and then me having to cut and paste things into the master one. That forces me to read things and actually see whether I can understand the logic in the response, and therefore raise particular queries with them. So I think if everyone was doing it in a live tracker or a template, whatever form of that be, I think the element of oversight from the PD potentially is lost. So people are changing and editing things, deleting things maybe inadvertently, and that causes an audit trail. Yes, the common data environment will track who deleted what, whatever, but as the PD, I'm not going to be looking back at that kind of revision or tracker. I'm just going to be looking at the most latest version. So that's why on this project, I've actually asked everyone to just go manual, email and upload things on the common data environment. So there's a log of that, but I will do the collating and then reissue that master version. For me, I think that more work, but I think it means that I can demonstrate that I've actually read every single thing and therefore have a better understanding as the PD.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm kind of looking at this from a practice level, that ultimately I think what we would want is to be able to identify, common trends and themes across all of our offices and designs. But I appreciate that's kind of a pipe dream at the minute, because we do work to the lowest common denominator, which is Excel or PDFs, isn't it? That's kind of where we're at. But I get your point about kind of the manual process of reading and copying answers across. I do understand that, and it is a fear of mine with a lot of these systems that they make complex processes kind of semi-automated, and I always kind of kick back on those to say, well, yes, but you've still got a responsibility to participate in this process. It's not just a race to the end. There's a process along the way.
And I think, AI is kind of, if you do ChatGPT, do a summary of this report, I've seen where they've, slightly fudged something or changed or taken a, quantity, and it's not the same as what I've just read in the email that I just put into there, for example. So I think there is that element of, yeah, we'll just automate it and they'll be fine. However, some other things like the gateway to information and checklist, that Andy from our team has generated in more of a database. So that, even though that looks like a Word document, the fields are sort of set up in a database way. So we can extract that. And for example, in the common data environment, I've asked for the project directory to be embedded into the common data environment, because at the moment I've got it as one of the tabs in the RIBA tracker, but that isn't where it should be. It should be in a common data environment, within the common data environment, so that there's a live directory, project information, project address, building heights, and some of those things should be in the common data environment as a data, within the database, let's say, so that the most accurate information is available for all the team members. So we're trying to, again, we've not used this common data environment before, and we've also, as a practice, are trying to set up templates for the BSA applications. So some things we're kind of, as I said, creating our own little database templates. Some things we're keeping it pretty lowest common denominator. So and find out what's the best going forward is.
One point that has been made to me about about it is the discussion that's flying around at the moment about as built drawings, as constructed drawings, final construction drawings. There seems to be lots of I think largely because people have at long last starting to scrutinize what all these things mean, because it does say in the legislation things need to be as built. And I was told that RIBA, one of the RIBA members, was sued a couple of years ago or relatively recently for having signed up to provide as builts, and they weren't able to. Are you familiar with this case, Joe?
Not familiar with the case, but I'm more than familiar with the conversations around this, and my perspective is that there's this kind of misinterpretation, isn't there, between information that's produced for design purposes through the design process, and the construction process is something that happens after that point, at which point the design team are very rarely involved in that. So we will always kick back against the requirement for as-built information unless there is a robust verification process in place at the end of the project, because we can only ever say that our final issue drawings is exactly that. It's a final issue. And from our perspective, from a design team member, what happens on site is kind of out of our remit.
Yeah.
So there's no way we can stamp our drawings as reflecting what's been on site unless there is a verification process in place.
Nikki, you got your hand up?
Yes, I wanted to ask a question actually. I haven't come across any architectural firm that will provide as-built drawings for the precise reason that they will have to be clerk of works essentially to verify what has been built. So when we, as the main contractor, we expect the subcontractors to provide their as-built. Now, in terms of the BSA and the golden thread requirement, how does that change that process? Because obviously, if each subcontractor provides as-built for their packages, essentially we wouldn't have holistic as-built information, if that makes sense. It will be per package.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of have two sort of thoughts on this. My initial thing is that, again, on a BSA HRB project, in theory, if we coordinated the design and it's compliant and we submit that design, coordinate design gateway to, and that is then constructed from, the contractor has to prove or sign, essentially certify that what's constructed aligns to the design. Or if something has changed, it'll go through the the notification or the made changes or whatever, and that will be some sort of variation contractually with designs or manufacturers or products. So in theory, if the what we've submitted and what others have submitted, i.e. M&E structures, hasn't been changed from gateway to application, then there really shouldn't be an issue in anyone issuing it as built, because theoretically nothing has changed, and if something has changed, that'll go through, so that kind of notification or change of control or whatever process and variations. However, I mean, I've, for example, on projects have asked the contractor, not on a HR pre-BSA, here are the drawings that we've issued for final record, or sorry, we've issued for construction. Can you verify that they are what you built on site? And they've said, yeah, this is what we built. But I know that's not what they built on site. So now one could say, legally, I've asked the question from the contractor team, and they've confirmed it, and therefore I'm going to issue this as built because that's what's being confirmed. If there's an issue with that, then the clear, responsibility line will be pretty obvious. It will be very quick, because if someone does check and the contractor hasn't built what's on our drawings, even though they've confirmed it, well, then that accountability is quite obvious. So, on theory, I don't personally have a big issue in issuing as final record, as built drawings. We've not had to do it, so I've not done it in practice. But theoretically, it shouldn't be that much of an issue if everyone has designed it fully, coordinated fully, been built according to their designs and drawings. Then what is the problem in issuing as built?
I think this is an absolutely critical thing that we as a group and also the other parts of our community need to be tackling, because I think that the clients, their advisors, everybody seems to be completely unaware of this massive gap that there is. And I was talking with a contractor yesterday, and he was saying, yeah, we've the models, it is complete. Yeah, so all the M&E's been done. I said, well, I'm amazed that the M&E's been done because, quite frankly, that normally the M&E information is in drawings. And he said, well, I said, so you're saying that you've got all the valves? He said, well, possibly not all the valves, right? And I said, okay, they're fairly critical M&E assets to control the systems. And as we dug into it, on a residential block, they only do a template for a flat type. They don't do the whole thing. And also, he said, well, why would you need anything other than a schematic? I can see Paul McSolly's come on. Why would you need anything other than a schematic, Paul?
That's an interesting question, George, isn't it? I like that one. And good to see everyone, by the way. Anna, good to see you as well. I haven't seen you for a long time. Andrew De Silva. So I've been a bit shy. It's been quite a busy few months, you could say. You wouldn't believe some of the stuff that's going on. But I think there's a few things that were said there, not to because I'm joining late, so I do apologise, everyone. And sometimes I don't even make these sessions, so I apologise again, George, because I do try to support.
No, you do.
The hard thing I think really is it's a level of detail issue as well. That if you take the MEP and you said it there, George, it's in 2D drawings, right? A lot of this stuff, a lot of the critical component elements in 2D drawings as well. We've kind of drawn out probably now. I've been doing some work for the ASFP, George, just to make you aware, which I should be able to share at some point. When you start drawing out all these different product interfaces with things like walls, including doors as well, and you see the complications involved, you can't really get that detail out of a model. It has to be drawn in like a detail which you can follow. And I think your point there, Andrew, I think you said earlier, just to recall me brain here a little bit, you kind of need to understand what details are applicable at what point, if that makes sense, because otherwise you don't know the level of information that forms it. So if you change it in future, you don't know what you're changing, if that makes sense. I haven't got diagrams I can show you, but on at the moment because I'm not allowed to. But essentially, when you look at things like pipe work, it's the pipe, it's the insulation, it's the jointing method, it's all the things around the attributes of the system, and the distances between them is set by the people that make the seals. So without the right order, you can't get those distances anyway. Then you've got the wall side of it as well. So it's not simple to solve that one, George. I don't think is what I'm indirectly saying.
Okay. Anna. I'm sorry, Daz, I'm taking
No,
over.
I totally agree with everything that's been said. I just wanted to say the piece of work of getting from design information to as-built information will be different for different sectors, will be different for different types of clients, and it's actually an amazingly interesting piece of work. It's just that no one has currently quite worked out how to make money out of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So as a piece of work, it hasn't yet commercially become a clear, clear to clients why to pay for, and clear to us how to make money out of it. As soon as it becomes commercially viable, I think it will be like one of the most interesting pieces of work that we could be doing as it's basically the extension of a client role. Of our designer, builder, architect, whatever you are, consultant's role. Yeah. At the moment, for example, we have transportation jobs for TfL. TfL does require you to submit as-built information, but TfL has a whole procedure of what is actually considered to be as-built information, and then they pay you for it. Yeah. So that's it. That's what's missing. Yeah. What's missing is somebody who knows what they need as a handover piece of information, somebody to say this is needed, i.e. this stage of work exists, and then somebody to pay you for it. And once that's in place, we're all going to be fine. and we're all going to have lovely handover models anyway. At the moment, we try to offer clients at least like to help them unpick like what's reasonable for them, because they don't need every valve. They don't even need every, they actually need a tidied up set of information with some good, naming strategies and stuff like that.
How do you know which valves they don't need?
Yeah, well, exactly.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting, by the way.
But the MEP, the MEP, while they still have the MEP subcontractor on board, they can have that conversation with them. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So
I'm not suggesting that you would need to model every valve, but what I think we should have is if the valves are being identified in schedules, and if they're identified as a drawing, that the references that are on the drawing are consistent with the ones that are in the schedules, which seems blindingly obvious, but we often find that isn't the case. I've got one last question just before I give way to Philip. Is it the principal designer's responsibility to oversee that that's being done, or is it the principal contractor's responsibility? Because the principal designer and the principal contractor, I'm not quite sure, and I'm not sure anybody does, where one starts and one finishes. I think the principal designer is there until the end of the project. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, both parties are there. Again, simplicity, in my view, the PDs that kind of manage, monitor, coordinate roles up to the gateway to submission on a HRB project, and then it's the contractors to kind of build to that and flag up really where there are changes. And I guess a bit like CDM, if there are changes that are required for whatever reason, then the PD essentially comes back online because something is changing. And then we've got to go through that as a PD to make sure whatever is being substituted or changed is still compliant.
Or not been installed, or the drawings don't reflect what's actually what was designed.
Yeah, but that's where I think that, in my view, that's PC to flag that. If they're meant to be building the design,
Yeah.
so that's why I don't think theoretically it should be, if at the beginning of the project everyone's defined what needs to be submitted, level of detail, tolerances, etc. I don't, bit like the BIM discussions that we've had previously. There shouldn't really be a huge amount of work that's needed at the end, because we should already know what we needed to have done, level of detail, tolerance, etc. And if something's changed, you go through a variation, all that process. So that's why I think theoretically it should be not that complicated, to be able to then all parties to say this is the as-built information. I mean, T. Clark was an M&E consultant on one of the projects, and I had their model and their drawings were constantly getting reissued because little things were changing, which might seem annoying, but actually it was reflecting the fact that they were changing their model, therefore the drawings, everything, and schedules as they went through. It's exactly the kind of rigor that's required. Sorry, Paul, back to you. Philip, sorry, yeah. Philip, I think we.
Philip, you were going first, weren't you? Yeah, Philip.
Well, I feel the conversation has moved on, and I think some of the things were said already. I think just on the as-built, I think the problem very often is it's a status to the drawing and not to the elements on it. And a lot of elements on a drawing might not be relevant. Whereas, I mean, you use the example of pipes or pumps, which might be relevant, but the other bits on it that you might not like to qualify as built. But yeah, I think we've gone a bit further than that. I like Anna's idea of making money out of it. I think we've been trying to do that by modeling subcontractor information for coordination. We wouldn't call it as built, but then considering it as a change to our design, and therefore getting paid for it. Whether then a contractor will sign it off or changes the status, I think that's how I see it. The drawing, the suitability on the CDE is changed by the contractor to as built, and they confirm that it is built, and it takes the responsibility away from us and leaves it with them, because they're the ones on site, they're the ones able to check it. That's how it should probably work.
Well, and Nikki's made a good point on the chat as well about contractor's ability or PI levels. Paul, over to you.
Yeah, do you know what? It's good listening to it. And Anna, your point about capitalising it is a massive point, and that is so important. Is that if there's not money in it, people won't capitalise and do it. That's really, really well said. I was going to say as well, one of the things that I've got to the realization of, and I probably sound like a broken record, George, but one of the big things I think that's kind of apparent is that then there's two things to this actually. One is when we talk about MEP, there's a recognition that there's an issue around how the MEP is currently procured, if that makes sense. Everyone realizes that. So BISRI has undertaken a revamp of BG6, the framework for MEP design at the moment. So watch that space. It's being updated accordingly, okay, to reflect the fact that things need to be done slightly differently, which is a great thing. I think the big thing for me is that when you look at, where did the debate come from the other day? A contractor can be a designer and a designer can be a designer, right? That's how the wording's done in clause 11, right? Also, it recognises that it's all about competence, right? And if you've not heard it, I think Hackett was speaking in Parliament yesterday, and you can listen to the recording of that, and it's quite interesting. If you've not seen it or aware of it, she was in one of the chambers talking about the regulator and what's gone on. And there's some really big value points in there. I think it's really good to take in if you've not heard it. It really puts things into context. The problem I think that currently exists, without sounding like I'm being, again, George, like a broken record, is that if you look at designing performance terms and we say you build what's to that performance as a contractor, not as a designer, if the performance is wrong and you built it, the performance is still wrong. But what's been contractually built is correct to that design because the design's wrong. Yeah, makes sense?
Yeah.
So one of the problems that kind of exist is the fact that there's hidden figures in performance, and everyone's looking at it. And you say about valves and stuff, George, and it's really important because if it's a pressure relief valve, it's safety critical because it's under Pressure Equipment Directive, and it's just a control valve, maybe it's not. So there's different, statuses around different components that go in. But if you think of it that if someone's gone away as the legally responsible designer and say they go, you're going to do a contractor's design portion, which if you read contracts doesn't necessarily mean you're a designer because it reflects what's inside the contract documents in relation to the designer that's saying this is what the CDP element is. They generally will say the same thing. You will complete the design with the appropriate materials and working drawings to meet the design performance. But when you go to the design performance, it's like Mother Hubbard's cupboard. It's quite bare. And the reason is that the performance, say for you take a kitchen extract, isn't where the kitchen extract's located. It's its route on how it's got there drives its total resistance. But the airflow, the cleaning, requirements for it is all done by the ventilation designer who does the part F side of it. And the fire engineering side is the fire engineer saying, well, this is its maximum resistance en route. This is what insulation it's going to need. The contractor is actually just doing the manufacturing drawings to meet that design. So it's not really design per se. It's contract details to meet that requirement. But if the requirement's wrong, the detailing's wrong. And this is where the kind of problems coming into it is that when you look at the level of performance that's given around most of the systems, especially safety critical, like your fire side or your structural safety systems, the performances that are required are a lot more in depth than just the part B element. It might be part F, part L. Pipework's a nightmare because it could be conveying oil, gas, oxygen in a hospital, perhaps. It's got maybe rainwater in it. It could be sewage. All different categories of risk. But then you've got the reaction to fire of the material. Is it appropriate to the space? Can you put it there? You see I'm going with this. That performance is what's leading to the incorrect detailing in the building work element, because if the performance is wrong, the building work element's wrong, if that makes sense. And that's the conundrum that's really hard to resolve. And it probably comes down to is that can the designers that are appointed at the start do that level of detail, or is there a case to say, well, actually, if you look at design responsibility, this is where I think it's not fit for purpose, to put it quite frank, is that the performances to get to the whole performance picture may involve third parties like a ventilation specialist in dampers or someone that's specialist in kitchen extracts to get the inherent design performance correct before you go to the detailing. And to do that in DRM is physically, I think, impossible, because you need to break the subjects out by the product components, which I don't think anyone's got the grind to do. If that makes sense, just to add my 2 pennies worth.
I think that's really helpful for me anyway, because when the comparison you were using there about ventilation, so you've got somebody that is a ventilation engineer that would probably be leading on that, but unless they've got, unless somebody that's got fire engineering experience is also looking at that same system, it's potentially going to be not
It's going
right.
to fail. It's going to fail. Yeah, it will fail.
And I think I guess that's where the even more rigor and the kind of compliance statements that are required for Gateway 2 should be going into that level of scrutiny in the design, because especially subcontractors, or to a certain degree, main contractor has to be on board already, special contractors for the critical elements need to be on board. So all of those questions and checking theoretically needs to happen, not theoretically,
Yeah.
it needs to happen to be able to the PD and everyone to say the design is compliant. And if it's not, then again, further down the line, that audit trail comes back to whoever hasn't kind of fulfilled their role properly. So even though check in theory, all of those kind of decisions, scrutinization has to happen. The PD is part of that in terms of coordinating those discussions. And then, so the design should be compliant, and then therefore the contractor just builds it out accordingly. But you're absolutely right. If the design is wrong, then how could anyone have said that the design is compliant in that gateway application?
Yeah, and Andrew, just to add, I think what's happening. This is why that Hackett thing online was pretty good. What's I think's happening is what I maybe know more than I should do. I think that's happening is that when it comes to the regulator, they look at it, they can see that it doesn't look necessarily complete, but then maybe they don't know why, because they haven't got that level of competence either. No disrespect to them, not putting them down. They might, but they can only spot what they know, and the people that have submitted it don't maybe understand those hidden performances either. So you get into this. Well, they maybe reject it because it doesn't look complete, but maybe don't understand why. But the person submitting it doesn't understand why, what's missing, what's not there. If that makes sense. And that's
Agreed.
the kind of loop that seems to be going on.
Yeah, could I just go back to my first question, Paul, that I was asked yesterday about schematics? Because I think the other problem is I come across people that don't understand that a schematic isn't just a 2D plan.
Yeah.
And a schematic's got no relationship with locations. That's my understanding. And therefore,
yeah. Go on, George. Carry on, sorry.
yeah, and therefore, is there? I mean, I think my understanding is that the contractual document isn't the model typically. People would say it's the model, and in theory, people think that all the drawings have been generated from the models, but in practice, certainly, it appears to me on the M&E front, they're often the principal information is coming from the model, but the detail is added using AutoCAD.
Yeah.
So it's only in the drawing.
I think to probably put into context, Jules, and this is probably a debate around the BG6 element as well, is that some things work well in a model, some things don't. And so you have to look at it on the context. If you do a schematic for a ventilation system, it should show you where it feeds. It should do.
Yeah.
Because it should be directly relatable with the reference number to where it's located, right? And that's the reality of it. But also where it's located, you should know what the wall is as well, or the substrate. You should also know what's in the room and what it's, somewhere on a schedule, what that room does. So you can relate the whole product journey to why it's been used at that particular location, why it's got the airflow for litres a second, why it's got the resistance it has, etc., and how it's compatible with that substrate, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
The problem around that sort of detail, and I've got one image I can kind of show, I think, which makes it a bit clearer, is that in detailing for ducts, that's the kind of detail that's required to get that part right. Now, you can't represent that in a model. It needs a detail that's drawn in 2D. So you represent that detail at that point, if that makes sense. And that's how it has to be kind of drawn up. And I think you said the point there, Andrew, as well, is that some of that detailing can't come from the design team unless you understand the product system you want to use. That's the point. So when you look at it in collaboration around the designer and you look at the performances, there's a case for saying, well, who's best placed to generate the appropriate performance to understand actually your spatial awareness and your basically your compliance of interface is correct, as well as respecting the fact the thing's got to deliver the air correctly and the energy correctly and remove or transfer the smoke correctly. But it's a very big puzzle to unravel, if that makes sense.
But if for example all they're doing is producing templates for flat types, so therefore none of the network, the system, has actually been even drawn. Surely from an operational and an asset management point of view, that's a bit of a challenge, isn't it? Because
yeah, I think if you take Resi, I'll give you a couple of examples, some of the stuff I had to deal with recently, just to give you a bit of an insight. So if you take residential, the way it was tackled, when I was looking at it probably 10 years ago, was that typology, and I'm sure anyone that does Resi will either agree or shoot me down. Typology is about the types of flat that you're doing, but it's also then about the handing of such things inside like bathrooms because of your acoustics. So that drives your typology as well. But also the third thing that drives it the most is your location, your ventilation in and out. That's the other thing that really drives it. Depends where the ventilation goes to the external, because that affects your engineering typology massively. And if you respect those three things, you generally can get to what started off, I think, on one of the projects at Greenwich with 13 types, ended up at 79. And that was the right thing, because then we could design around 79 types. No one liked it because of the cost, but funny enough, they all came out pretty okay.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing to probably bear in mind is that if you look at student residential, and probably a bit of a spoiler alert, if you look inside the new 9991, and it has been raised, utility cupboards now have 30 minutes of resistance, and it tells that you've got to use basically motorized fire dampers, your ES fire dampers, across your corridor. And it's a bit of a funny one because you haven't got self-closing doors in a residential. You see what I'm going with this? So the doors can be open, and you've got these motorized fire dampers in, and we've said, well, what are you trying to prevent? Because it will not go into the other room, but the door's open, so the smoke's potentially still in the corridor. So I don't see what that benefits. But when you put it into a student residential, then you don't want the smoke going between the rooms because it's a different category of risk of people within it.
Yeah.
See what I'm going to? So it's really hard to try and look at the engineering. And I think where I'm kind of getting to it, this is that because there's this, and I think she said it yesterday in that thing, there's a really bad problem with competency. I think we all know this, right? And I think we all realise that there's things about these systems we don't know, and actually other people we're asking don't know either. That you need more examples drawn of the scenarios to get us over the line now with these types of complex buildings. We can't necessarily think someone can engineer it potentially correctly. We've actually got to show them the way.
Yeah.
So it's really hard. So like, I mean, in typology of residential, it's literally in my head, it's always those three things, because the acoustics of the bathroom and the location of the systems are blooming disaster, depending on where it is. And it's just about the extract and obviously the generics between the types that suit those types, essentially.
Got it. Okay.
So I hope that's good food for thought. I don't know if that helps.
No, that's really useful, Paul. Thank you very much. Quite, we've got a couple of minutes. I don't know if anyone's got any other things they want to raise, question. Again, generally, I'll kind of keep up to date in terms of how the project's going, because that's the kind of the case study, I guess, that I have direct experience of and will have going forward. So I'll provide an update next time we meet as well. But anyone else got anything last minute?
I'll just raise a couple of points, Andrew. Obviously, I just said, obviously, BG6 is being updated, so you're aware of that. So that is going on for the right reasons. So the other thing to bear in mind, I think there's a new PAS coming out this week on construction products and how you put them to market. If I can give me 2 seconds, I can tell you, I think, what that number is as well. Sorry, John, I don't join very often, George, but when I do, I try to go out with a bang, mate. So just bear with me. Because there's so much going.
Share that on the chat, Paul.
Yeah, see if I can find the number.
Will that Will that BG6 update address the situation where the M&E design is progressively, the three stages, I can't remember what they were, but they were during work stage 4, weren't they? And now
you had, I'll explain. If you look at the journey of BG6, it used to be stage A, B, C, D, E, and F. Yeah, everyone remembers that. 2002, then 2008, you went to F1, F1A, or F1, F2. Then it changed to F1A, F1, F2, F2B, something like that. Then it went to stage 4A, 4B, 4C. Then it's gone to 4.1, 4.2, 4.3. And I think if you look at it in principle, the way I've always tried to describe it, was that after we stopped going from D to E, and if you look back in that journey, now only got a couple of minutes here, is that when you designed an engineering system at stage D, you go to general product manufacturers to get your product, so you understood your design was workable. And when you went to stage E, it was actually a very quick refresh to get there. You already knew what you were going to use, depending on how the contract was going to go. But because contracts changed into this design and build morph that's happened, it was kind of recognised that people were going out on the first stage, 2-stage tenders or straight into design and build with a quick turnaround, and they weren't necessarily detailing the products. They were just doing the generic performance.
Yeah.
Which is what's led to part of the problem. I think we'd all agree with that. There's now a bit more of a recognition, I think, that the 3 bits at the end was always intended to be, you got your performance, you got your specialist, you refreshed your performance accordingly. That was the whole principle, what people were trying to follow, right? As in 1, 2, and 3, really. That's the whole principle of it all. But I think there's a bit more recognition there. It needs to be a lot more project, not the word generic, probably word like project specific at stage 3, and a bit more specific at stage 4, but still allow for the options around how people do the contractual routes. But the bottom line is, you need to get to a high level of detail earlier to achieve what you need later on. Well, it's all around that word of critical clash and what forms a critical clash, if that makes sense.
And that would be before Gateway 2.
Absolutely, you can't go to Gateway 2 unless it's all done. Absolutely correct. Yeah.
So BG6, from a simple term, if people ask me, I can say that there's a new version of BG6 coming through that will address the fact that the M&E design has got to be completed before.
I think all you can say, George, is that it's been updated to reflect the building safety requirements. That's what it's been done at the moment. It's still in early doors, but it's been updated.
Well, have you any idea when it's going to be around?
I think you're probably looking towards the end of this year, without saying too much, because I'm not speaking on behalf of BISRI. I'm just here to support BISRI in the industry. But I think probably towards the end of this year. So yeah, I think it's important that people realise that this stuff's going on, because I think the bottom line is, I agree. Everyone refers to that, and it's such a key document. If you've never read it, you should always read it, because it's not out of date per se. The principle's correct, but because you've got new duty holders, like recognising, for instance, that if you're doing a CDP element, there's one designer, one contractor. And if you go in turnkey, you better make sure that you've got agreement with your PD and that person's on at the right stage, because the client's responsible for sufficient time to ensure it's complete correctly, if that makes sense, which is in the spirit of what's written, if that makes sense. One of the other things I think would be good to consider, so not to harp on, Andrew, and I don't come very often. One of the things in the regulation changes is that it says the principal designer, brackets, the lead designer, right? You know I'm going to go with this, right? Obviously, the difference between a lead designer and the principal designer is one's plan managing and monitoring, one's doing the lead coordination, and it's not necessarily the same thing. So there's a bit of a debate about that at the moment as well. So any thoughts on that? That'd be quite good to hear as well.
No, thank you. I would just probably say, yeah, agree. There's difference. Shouldn't be in a bracket. But whether that's happy with it, I guess there's a danger when some people look at the wording and kind of get fixated by little things rather than the bigger picture, cultural kind of change that you must be. That sort of almost delve too deep into the nitty gritty. Clearly, it's obvious. Well, look, thanks again for everyone's time, and hopefully that's of some benefit. And the next time, I'll continue to give an update on the project. If anyone else got any other submission experience or templates or anything, or good and bad, that'll all stay fantastic from everyone. But now have a good rest of the week.
Yeah, guys, good to see you all again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, guys.